Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time. It's 12:30, and we like to kick our sessions off on time. The session today is automated procurement for Infor SunSystems. My name is Neil Richardson. I'm the MC and introducer for the day. I'm ably joined by Stephen Mitchell, one of our senior application consultants. Between the two of us, we have a frightening almost 30 years of involvement and experience with SunSystems and PA, both locally here in Australia and internationally. Before we get started, I'd like to cover off a couple of issues. Questions are very welcome. We encourage questions, but we do ask you to enter them in the questions box within the webinar control panel on the right-hand side. Please do ask them as we go. If I see a couple that are particularly pertinent and quickly answered as we go, I might interrupt the product demonstration to ask those questions, but the plan is to leave some time at the end of the session to go through the questions asked. We do aim to finish off tightly on 45 minutes. If we don't get through all the questions, we'll follow up with emails on those. Also, we're recording the session, so we'll upload that session to the PA YouTube channel, and of course send you the link out to review again or share with your colleagues. Also, on your exit, there will be a very short survey. We really appreciate your feedback. So on your exit out of the webinar, please do take just 1 minute to answer the questions in the survey. So the agenda today is, covering off the drivers for improving your spend control. I'm going to talk very quickly about the number one thing that you must get right from our experience. We know there's one thing that will kill your project if you don't get it right. And then the bulk of today's session is a taster demonstration of iPOS, which is the eProcurement component of SunSystems. And as I said, a bit of time at the end for Q&A. Common drivers for improving spend control, and these are very much from our experience over quite a number of years at addressing this very area or work package in businesses. Growth is a key driver for some organizations. Only a couple of weeks ago, I was discussing with an organization, the financial controller of an organization in the UK. They are currently in the process of merging with another organization which is almost half as big as they are. So it's quite a significant project. And one of the things that was commented on is, had they not already been on top of their spend control, already have their processes and procedures in place, their delegation of authority automated, the scale of that merger would be such a challenge today. But because the iPOS automation of procurement is already in place, it's really just a case of scaling out the systems and processes that they've already got, and it's a huge saving in time and stress for him. Risk and fraud, very common. There's lots of things in the press these days about unwise spend at a corporate level, but there's also some of the very basic things. We don't want to pay an invoice to a supplier more than once. We want to make sure that people are spending money on the things that they should be spending money, and with the suppliers that we choose for them to purchase from. A very common driver is audit and control, and I think regardless of whether you're a corporate entity, whether you're a not-for-profit or in the public sector, enforcing the delegation of authority is a key part of control and good process, best practice, enforcing the purchasing policy to make sure that the money is spent where it should be, and that we do buy in budget. We spend the dollars we're supposed to spend. More and more, we're starting also to see companies, and particularly finance teams, say they want to push the effort back out into the buyer's hands. What they mean by that is, at the moment, they're sweeping up the spend by handling supplier invoices, and of course they're running around trying to work out who requested this, have we received it, who approved it, how's it to be cost allocated within the books, etc. And with every division, every department responsible for reporting on their costs and KPIs, the finance team are bearing perhaps an unfair load of administration effort that needs to be pushed back out into the business, and have the buyers themselves take responsibility for better spend, better control. One of the things we don't see people looking to do is, typically in the corporate world, not really looking to reduce the cost of their purchases. You know, generally in the SunSystems world, we're not really dealing with manufacturing or assembly type organizations where they have widgets and bits and bobs that they want to drive the cost down. So typically in the corporate spend, it's not a particular driver or motivator to drive down the cost of spend. But it certainly is possible to do so once you've got control of your systems. So the number one failing of a purchasing system, and we've seen this on many times where people approach us to say, we've tried to automate the purchasing, but it's been a failure. And it's been a failure because the system that they've kicked off with just doesn't have strong, reliable integration into the underlying ledger. And that is the piece that controls the single source of truth. Everybody wants to know that when they run their financial reports, those reports are accurate, reliable, and timely. And the bulletproof integration into the underlying finance system is a key part of making that happen. So to achieve things like commitment accounting, you know, real-time budget checking, you know, appropriate delegation of authority, double paying, and even pay on quality, you can only really achieve it with seamless integration to the ledger. And the system we're going to cover off today, iPOS, is the only module natively integrated to all of the flavors of Sun available in the market today. So there's lots of organizations still on Sun 4, Sun 5, and Sun 6. iPOS, the same version of iPOS that you see today, will work regardless of the version of Sun that you use. And the system is used by well over 30,000 people worldwide as we speak today. We're going to move now to the demonstration component. We're going to cover two scenarios. The first scenario is going to cover the front end of the purchase cycle. We're going to go through a requisition. What does that look like? What sort of controls are there? Pass it through for approval, and the obvious step then would be to issue a purchase order once it's approved. There are a number of steps that go through after that, goods receipting and things, but we're going to jump over those in the interest of time and tackle things from the accounts payable team then. So the supplier invoices are coming in at the back end. What are we going to do with them? We need to register the supplier invoice, potentially match it to a purchase order, and then approve it ready for payment. So we're going to have two scenarios to demonstrate today, and I'm going to hand over now to Stephen to pick us up and run us through the application.
Okay. Hello there, everyone. Welcome. Thanks to reiterate what Neil said. Welcome to the presentation. I'm just going to be walking through some parts of the iPOS application. As Neil pointed out, it's a bit of a teaser to what iPOS can do for you. It covers the full purchasing cycle, and there won't be enough time in today's session to cover it, so we're just covering those scenarios that Neil alluded to. In particular, I'm going to be drawing our attention to the workflow and approval structure that can be applied inside iPOS, showing us how we can have, how Neil talked about, delegations of authority, and we'll see how in iPOS that can be deployed, and see that items that iPOS will determine or identify who is the appropriate person that approves items, and we'll see it go off to that approver. We're going to look at a subset of the interaction with Sun, as Neil also pointed out. iPOS fits snugly with inside Sun. A fair amount of information is shared between Sun and iPOS, things like the suppliers, chart of accounts, analysis codes, tax codes, but haven't got time to look at all those. So we're going to look at just a couple parts of it, which is going to show the budget checking that can be applied during the purchasing process. So referring to the actuals and budgets that are stored inside Sun and using them to validate that when at the time of purchase there is funds available or budgeted funds available, and likewise illustrate that that when transactions are processed inside iPOS, that when they complete a certain stage, that it'll push the postings back into Sun and update the ledgers, and so any subsequent reporting will be as current as the last purchase order or last accrual or last invoice submitted inside iPOS. And finally, along the way, we're going to be looking at the item supplier relationships. Neil touched on that, pushing back into the hands of the originators to be making them more responsible and accountable. iPOS enables that through things like through item records and suppliers. So we're going to begin now. We're going to look at iPOS. This is the standard iPOS login screen. Deploying the iPOS security system. Has its own security system because iPOS has a far broader reach throughout the organisation than Sun. Got people adding source user areas, making requisitions, approvers spread throughout the organisation. So it has its own security table and details of who can access it. And along with that, as you'd expect with any good system, the security controls what people can do inside the system to the particular modules and what functions have available to us. So we've come onto the home page here for an iPOS user. Very quickly, it just shows you the modules you have access to. And if you don't have access to it, it won't be displayed on the top of the screen. Underneath each of the modules is equally the functions that you can do within the module. So in this case, we're a requisitioner, and we've got the ability to create, but you could be a requisitioner that just only has the ability to search and view, look at other requisitions. You could be a requisitioner which has no capacity to do invoice entry. So the security very much kicks in here in what you can see and do in the iPOS world. Now, before I kick off, I'm just going to set the scenario for the first part. As Neil said, we're going to focus on raising a requisition and getting it through the workflow. So I'm setting the scenario. We're organising a work function, end of month work function, where we want to buy some food items to have at that function. So we're going to be raising a requisition against various suppliers to order our various goods. So to create a requisition, it's requisition create, opens up the create a blank new requisition screen. Now, as things typically are in iPOS, we start with a heading area to begin with, common pieces of information about this requisition. So the unique requisition number, in case you've forgotten who you are, who's raising it, the date. Then we come to some variable pieces of information, a delivery address code, a delivery date. So being purchasing, we're buying things. We want things to be delivered somewhere. So we've got to, through the delivery address code, want to be able to identify where we want that, where we want those goods or services to be delivered to, and goes with that a date to go to as to when you expect them to be delivered. A third piece of important information on this header is what we call the cost allocation. It's got a code here, but it's got a explanation here. It's essentially the analysis code combinations which are going to be used for this requisition. Now, the cost allocation serves two purposes. A, the purpose I just sort of alluded to, it's about identifying the analysis codes which are going to be recorded on the requisition and on any subsequent postings which happen off that requisition. So they're important from that respect. They're also important because cost allocations, or the analysis codes in particular, are normally or traditionally included as part of the delegation of authority structure. So when it comes to determining who needs to approve what, often things like a cost center or a project are a key driver in the determination of who is the appropriate approver. It can also be value-based, or in addition can be value-based, and it can even be account-based. So we can use any one of those three types of data to help us determine who is the appropriate approver. Now, in our case, it's based on a combination of the cost allocation code and the value of the line. Now, if a person, when they're raising the requisition, needs to change any of those default values, we can go into edit mode. You can see magnifying glasses next to fields. That represents as a drop-down list of available values. And we could click on, so if I wanted to change the cost allocation code, I could click on there, and this would presents to the person the list of available cost allocations. Now, it's not all cost allocation codes. It's only those cost allocation codes which have been assigned for their use. So you could have a system with 200 or 300 different cost allocation codes, but only for this person, they've been assigned 6 of them. So they can only choose any one of those 6 to be recording their requisition against. And at this point in time, it is only a default cost allocation. We do get the capacity at the line level. If we're doing a 3-line requisition and 2 of them have the same, then you'd set the default to the 2, and then on the 3rd one, we would just change it. I'm not going to change it for the moment. I'm going to leave it as J Corp. I'm going to leave, I better put a delivery date on it. So put a delivery date on. Now, delivery date can be used for alerting people for an overdue deliveries, can be used for extracting reports to sort of let you know when goods, have been, where a delivery date has been defined and the goods have not yet been received. So I'll change it to that. I'll leave the delivery address as the business center suite, so I'll save it. And then proceed with creating my requisition. Now we begin by our requisition by adding an item. Now, adding an item is really adding a line to our requisition. Whether we can set it up to be, we only allow people to buy predefined items, or we can allow people to create ad hoc purchases. It's a configuration issue. But in this example, we're going to go in with predefined items. And I should point out that predefined items don't necessarily have to be just physical items. Items can be goods or services that you buy on a regular basis, and you want to predefine them to capture certain standard details, as we'll see in a second. So I'm buying for a function, so my first thing I want to do is buy some mince for my hamburgers. So I'm going to go searching for my items. I've clicked on the item code list, up pops the list of available items, and just like on the cost allocations, this is a list of items that have been made available to me. Again, doesn't necessarily mean all items, just means the items that have been made available to you in your role. So me as a function organizer, I get access to food items. But if you were, say, in the marketing area, you may not have access to these things because it's not part of your remit to buy them. So I'm going to go searching for some mince. You can see easily good searching capabilities. So I can search on code or description, searching for anything where MI is part of it. And I'm going to buy some coursed beef mince. So I click on that, and it brings back, and now you get a feel for one of the things we've talked about, how through use of items we can increase the chance of data accuracy, or in turn reduce the chance of data corrupting, because against this item we've got things like the predefined purchase account, what account it should be charged to. So taking the decision out of the requisitioner as to what account I want to charge it to, it's got a predefined account code. I mean, it can be changed, but it's at least a preferred account. It's got the tax code for it. It's got the unit cost for it, and importantly, it's got a predefined supplier. Which takes us onto our again another level of control we can apply. And in this example, when I click on my supplier list, I get open a list of this tab, list of suppliers under a tab called Approved. This is an example of an approved supplier relationship where we've set in the system that we can only buy our mince from either of these 2 suppliers, nobody else. We have got 300 or 400 suppliers in the system, but for this item we can only buy it from one of these 2 items, so one of these 2 suppliers. So we've got a choice. I mean, it came up with FECAN because that was ranked as the first preferred, but I can change it to my Brisbane Bulk Meats and change the supplier for the requisition over to that particular supplier. I could, if the price had changed, if they'd given us a lower price, we can restrict the ability as to where they can change the price. But no, I'm going to buy 20 kilos of mince. Leave the price as it is. Got a net, got a total, got the account, got our cost allocation. We can even add a justification if we want to provide a reason for the add to this requisition so that when it goes off to the approver, they can see why we are buying the particular item. And so we can add that. And this note, not only does the approver see it, the note is attached to the requisition forever and a day. So when someone looks at the requisition in a month, in 6 months, in 12 months, then that justification message is retained there and is visible by all that can view it. So I've finished. I've captured all the screen. I should mention I'm working on the simple tab, and this is the commonly captured fields that are required on a requisition. These other tabs, which won't get a chance to look at in this session, but it's really just breaking some of this information out in greater detail. So, I mean, so things like, if I look at the supplier, which has got CCH here, but I'll go there, it's just greater detail about it. So we've got the ability to change some of that at that level, but I'll just focus on the simple screen at the moment. And so when we're said and done for this requisition line, we save it. At this point in time, it goes off and validates the data and checks the suppliers. In this case, we're seeing our first introduction to an interaction with Sun. It's actually, we've got budget checking applied, and it's actually telling us that this purchase is going over budget. It's going to put us over budget by X amount because it's comparing, it's looking inside Sun, looking at the actuals recorded to date, all previous commitments or accruals that have been recorded to date, and including the purchase that we're just making now. So we're getting an immediate awareness of whether we've got available funds or available planned funds for this particular expenditure. Now, in this case, we can override it, but we can set it as a fatal error. So if it's fatal, they would have to stop and either change the item or change the cost allocation or go and give themselves some more budget, any of the normal things to help going through. So we're going to proceed, click OK. Now immediately on the screen clears out. You can see in the background, I'll just close this for a second. So it's starting to accumulate the data, the requisition, the lines against this requisition amounts. You can see it's in red, a bit of visual awareness that it's an over budget item. When we do other lines, they'll become in a different color. We can also see the start of the iPOS has already started to determine work on the approval process. Based on what we've captured on the line, the cost allocation and the amount, it's already identified that for this line, it's to be approved by a user called Ricky Ponting. So I'm already being made aware, and it's aware of who this is going to go for approval. And so it gives me an alert in that sense. So I'm just going to continue on at this point. I'm going to add a couple of more items. I bought some meat, got to put the meat in some bread. So I'm going to buy some bread rolls. So I'm going to go and choose another item. So I'm going to buy some whole meal dinner rolls, well, semi-healthy rolls. And we're going to bring those back. And this is an example of, again, a lot of pre-definition about the item code, pricing, account code. Now in this case, I'm going to open a supplier code because it's coming with a preferred supplier. But in this case, we've got two tabs available to us, approved or all suppliers. So this is an example of what we call a preferred supplier. So we've identified these companies as our people that we prefer to buy from. But hey, if we don't want to buy from them, or if we know they haven't got any stock, we can go to the all suppliers list, which is the remainder of the suppliers in the system, and choose from any of those suppliers. I'm going to leave it as Tip Top Bakery because it makes sense that we buy our rolls from Tip Top Bakery. Bring the data back. So we would then just proceed about completing our requisition. So again, buying our items, we're going to buy 100 bread rolls. Our price, got the default purchase account, different purchase account at this point in time. Don't need to put it, don't need to put a justification in every line because it's on the first line. And so I will save that. You see, just like before, it clears it out, presents you with a screen, and you can see in the background, it's a black line because it went for the same budget validation check. And in this case, there's available budget for that item. We can see, like the line before, it's already gone through and identified who was the appropriate approver. So all good. So I'm going to now buy my third item to complete the requisition. We bought some meat, we bought some bread. We want to put some sauce in our hamburgers. So I'm going to buy some sauce and put them and add that to my requisition. So I'm going to buy some barbecue sauce. And this introduces to the third type of scenario from an item inside iPOS, where it's a mix of, there's some pre-definition about the item, but this is what is, there's no preferred or approved supplier defined, so no supplier has been linked in. And when I click on the supplier box, whilst there's an approved tab there, it's empty. No, none have been linked. Rather, I have access to all of the suppliers in the system, in which case I can make the choice and who I want to buy it from. And I'll get it from the same people as my meat. Of course, not being linked to a supplier, I haven't got things like defined like price, so I've got to put a price in. Very expensive sauce, $25.90. Doing some calculations, got its account there. I could add the description, and I can, when I'm done, I'll just save it. So very easy to be building up the requisition, very timely, very quick. And so when I'm finished, I close my line entry screen, brings me back to my requisition summary screen. See, I've got 3 lines in it, summary of each of the lines, already identifying who the approver is. And so now in this scenario, I should point out, my approval is based on line level approval. We can equally have header level approval, in which case the whole of the requisition just goes off for approval to one person, whereas in this situation, approval's been done at the line level, and it has identified who the line approver is. And when we submit this, an alert of some description, no, I shouldn't say some description, alert will go to the approver, letting them know. So I'm just going to submit that, an alert, and then an alert will go to Ricky Ponting. Me as Mark Sherman goes back to my front screen in readiness to do my next iPOS transaction. Now, Ricky, he's received an email with, looks not too dissimilar to this, with a summary of who it's come from, brief summary of what's on the requisition, and a URL link through to the URL page to for them to carry out the approval process. Alternatively, I should also make you aware that there are 2 other forms of approvals available. There's mobile approvals, which is to be done via a mobile device, or there's a mobile an approval notification app which we can run on our machine, and you might have seen already a little bubble come up every now and there saying iPOS notifications. That's just letting a user know that there are requisitions or invoices awaiting their approval. I'm just going to keep going down off the URL. I'm just going to now log in as Ricky Ponting. And he's same sort of the principle in terms of he has visibility and access to any of those functions that have been made available to his user. He comes in on the to-do page, and as the to-do page sounds, requisition lines are waiting for approval, invoice lines are waiting approval, orders are waiting to be receipted. Our objective or our focus here is requisition lines awaiting approval. I'm going to click on here. From a requisition approval perspective, this is his or her workbench, showing him all the requisition lines that are awaiting his action. And I suppose it's always an objective of an approver to come in here and clear it either by approving it or clearing it by returning it back to the originator saying that you've got some problems with it, or you can reject it. And those actions are available across the top here. Now, in the case of a reject or a return, and can't just be selfish and just reject it and not tell anybody. In both cases, the approver is prompted to enter in a reason, and that reason will be conveyed back to the requester, for alerting them that the requisition has been rejected. Now, you can also just quickly see down the bottom that iPOS notification is just is that other alternative bubble help or bubble way of getting into iPOS approvals. I'm not going to reject it. I'm going to proceed along its way. I'm going to approve it. I'm going to approve the 3 lines that I just did. So even though it's line driven, I have to mark each of the lines, but I can do them all in one hit. I don't have to do line by line. I can open the line up if I want to see more details about the requisition. I can sort of see, so I can see the supplier, the pricing, I can see the cost. I can even see the justification reason there, and I can see everything about it. You can also, in this setup, we've got the ability to edit the requisition, which is uncommon. Normally, approvers don't want to edit it, so they wouldn't normally set up that way. We'd normally just have the ability to return it. But as I said, we're going to approve it. Now, after it's approved, first of all, budget checking is applied at the approval level. So now the approver is made aware of an item exceeding budget, and this is the same alert that the requisitioner got, letting them know that on line 1 and it's over budget. And again, we can make that a fatal error, or we can allow them to proceed. I'm going to click close. Now, the approval process in my example here is only 1 level of approval, but you could have up to 6 levels of approval in place. Might be value driven, so if it's between $0 and $1,000, it might just go to 1 level. Between $1,000 and $10,000, it might need to go through 2 levels. Between $10,000 and $50,000, it might need to go through 3. The invoice would be the requisition would continue through the process until it gets to the end of its process, end of the approval process. When it does get to the end of the approval process, an alert, another email, goes back to the originator to let them know that the requisition has got the final level of approval and is now awaiting placement on a purchase order. And that placement on a purchase order could be done manually or automatically. Now, at the same time, we've got some posting rules hanging off the requisition, so we want to recognise the soft commitments. And we can see that from 2 respects. If I quickly log back in as my requisitioner, certainly from the requisition stage, I can see here 2 things. I can see on the line status, which shows me the journals that it's populated. So you can see it's done a journal inside Sun. So if nothing, so we know a journal of some description has been done, and we'll have a look at that shortly. We can also see here an audit status. So we can also see you've also got a trail of who's done what to the order or the requisition to its current life. Now, the other stage, as I said, it showed we've done a journal. We can see that posting through to Sun. I've got a little advanced inquiry query here, which is just a quick snapshot of the balances in the current system. I've done my requisitions against these 3 accounts. Can't note the soft commitment numbers are there. So if I refresh it, they've all changed to reflect the additional cost there. If I quick looked on this one, look at 1432, you can see the last lot of requisition 320's done the posting there, and so it's done the real-time posting. Of course, as the document progresses through the system, those commitments are cleared out when it becomes an accrual. And so there's a quick taste of what we can do at the requisition stage in terms of budget checking, postings into Sun, the workflow, the approval process that we can put inside iPOS. Now, going to the other scenario that Neil talked about, invoice processing and invoice matching. Now, we're going to, so it's all been done also naturally in iPOS, and we have the ability to, because all invoices don't necessarily link through to a purchase order. There's sometimes that invoices purchasing is done, which doesn't really coincide or fit well with having a purchase order, things like utility bills, sometimes travel. Some people like to process them as a direct invoice entry. And because of those sorts of reasons, the invoice entry process has got its own workflow approval rules in place. So we've got workflow and approvals for requisitions, and we've got workflow and approvals for invoice entry. So I'm going to do invoice entry to a purchase order that I have previously entered and received. And so I'm going to load from the order. Presents me with a heading screen, much like in the requisition screen. So it's come from north side. Now it's from CCH. It's got some dates. It's also presented the available line values. So I've got to put in an invoice number, a date, invoice date. The amount. Now you've got to imagine you've got an invoice in front of you. My invoice is going to be for $234.80, so it's actually for more than the available line. So we've got a discrepancy there. So we've got to address, and so I complete my heading there, and then brings the lines forward that are available for invoice matching. So it's got the total value lines in the system things. We've also got the value that the invoice was. So one of these items actually costed us $20 more than we originally planned for. Now, through our setup, we can decide how to handle those overspends. So I'm going to first of all say, okay, it's my course mints, which has gone up by $20. So I'm going to change that to $116.80. And I've got to tell it in that instance to force receive a higher amount. So I've got to receive the higher amount, and my other line is invoice exactly as it is. Excuse me, so I just got very husky. Anyway, so we've got a tolerance check and says if our line is 100% right, it doesn't need to go for approval. But if the line is for more than the original order line, then it will need to go up for approval. So I'm going to click on select all and force the over receipt process. Now you'll see automatically over here my totals are now in line because I've forced the line value up to agree to it. You'll see a little yellow dot here to reflect that there's been a change made. It's identified who the approvers could be or should be, but when I submit this, we'll see, first of all, I should add, budget checking is equally applied here. So again, reminding us that there's an overspend on our invoice, and again, it's an overridable one. So I'm going to proceed, and what that does is brings us back and says, well, okay, line 1 or line 2, I should say, has passed the tolerance and doesn't need any further approval, but line 2 does. It has gone off to Ricky Ponting as well. Now, I should point out that whilst that has gone off, whilst line 2 is past the tolerance check, nothing is posted inside Sun yet. Nothing posts inside Sun until all the lines on the invoice are cleared. So just like in the requisition stage, a email alert has gone off to Ricky, letting him know that there is someone has submitted an invoice, again, a summary of what the invoice is about, and again, a URL link to the internet page if that's used. So I'm going to now log out, log in as Ricky Ponting. Again, so onto his to-do page. So previously we were interested in his requisitions waiting approval. Now we're interested in his invoices waiting approval. Click on that. Top of the list is our invoice 94 that we've just processed, awaiting his approval. Again, much like in requisitions, this is the workbench for invoice approval. Their objective should be to clear it, either return it or approve it. And again, if we return it, you'll be prompted for to put in a message. Otherwise, we'll approve it. We click on approve. It'll disappear from the workbench. And at that point in time, the journal is now posted into Sun, and I can see that via here, looking at 94. And I can look at this onto the line status, and you can see journals have been posted at the invoice stage on line 94. I'd like to show you something in advanced inquiry, but because it's been previously accrued, it's all already in the actual ledger, so it would only just move, it's just moving numbers in the actual ledger. Just finally, I'm just going to show you the alternative to invoice matching is to do a direct invoice, and we'll see workflow control kick in there. I've got my electricity bill from the power company, so if we're not matching to an invoice, we can't load from order, we create invoice. Prompts us through our heading where we got to, much like the requisition, choose the key fields for our item. So I'm buying from Dracula, Fangs or Us. Put our invoice number in. Put our date in. Oh, and you can see already duplicate invoice checking already applied there. I've already previously used that invoice in previous other work. Put an amount in, $1,100, monthly power bill. And I save it. So in this case, this is effectively my header, no line totals, so I've got to add a line. just like in requisition, except it's on the screen here. So I'm going to add my item code, I didn't log out. I should have changed my user. I'm going to just log out and come in as my user that has the invoice capability. Quickly catch up on it. Add line to it. Oh no, sorry, create invoice. Go through the same steps. Sorry, I was logged in as the approver and he didn't have the ability to process the invoice. INV 25 12 8 17 $100 monthly electricity bill, monthly bill, save, add my line, choose my item. There's my electricity item. So you can see that how different configuration has access to different inventory items. Put in my $1,000 for the unit. It's coming with a default account. Looking for a cost allocation, $1,100. I can save that. It identifies who the approver is. It's all done, said and done. My lines equal my headings. I can now submit it. Just like before, an alert goes off to Ricky Ponting, same sort of alert that we saw before. I'll log in and see Ricky. Again, bring into his screen under invoices awaiting approval. Now, when for approval, because it's a direct invoice. Invoice 96, $1,100. Approve it. Now, this we can see, again, like the invoice before, has immediately posted inside Sun. And we can see that, first of all, from 96 here, it's gone into, we can see on the line status, posted a journal. But we can actually see it in Advanced Inquiry because this is a whole new journal to the actual ledger. And so looking at electricity expenses, got $3,090 of expenses. If I click on refresh, it will now increment to $4,090.91. So you can sort of see there, and that again, illustration of the real-time posting of the expenses back into Sun. Which brings me to the conclusion of the presentation of the items we wanted to show you as a taster for what we can do in iPOS. So thank you very much, and I'll pass you back to Neil.
Stephen, thank you very much. That was a whistle-stop tour through two sets of functionality there, one raising a requisition, the other one processing an invoice. Now, we have had a couple of questions come through. I'm very aware of time. We've just got a couple of minutes. If we suspend a supplier in Sun, will that stop any more purchases being made in iPOS, Stephen?
Yes, it certainly will. Only active suppliers are available in iPOS.
Right, again, a show of the underlying integration with Sun. Yeah. Can I attach files? Second question, can I attach files like supplier quotes to the requisition and the actual invoice to the invoice entry screen?
Yes, we can. There's no restriction as to what types of files we can add. It's a file and they can be attached at any stage in the purchasing process. But yeah, definitely at the requisition stage, if you want to attach specifications, quotes, contracts, all those things can be attached, and then equally at the invoices, copies of invoices.
Thank you. Next question. You mentioned mobile approvals. Is that for both requisitions and invoices?
Yes, it certainly is.
Okay. And the final question, unless anyone else is frantically typing, last one in the list is the supplier invoice number, checked to make sure it is not a duplication?
Yes, it certainly is, and we actually saw that in my last example. We did, it certainly is.
Right, good. We'll give 10 more seconds for any other questions to come through. Stephen, if you could hand over control to me. Okay, no more questions coming through, and we're pretty much bang on time. So any further questions, or if you'd like to interrogate us some more on the capabilities of iPOS and solving the procurement challenge within your business, who to contact. For our existing contacts, of course, reach out to your friendly account manager. You'll know who that is. Conversely, if you're new to PA, inquiries at pa.com.au for an email. And there's our phone number there. And as mentioned, we'll be issuing a recording of this to everybody. Just one comment, there's a previous event recording now available on the YouTube channel for Infor BI, or older name Infor PM10 customers. 3 pieces of gold you may not know about Infor BI. So that's available on our YouTube channel right now. And you can link through to it from our events website as well. And finally, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon, for making time in your diary. Just a final reminder that there is a very short survey on the way out, and we really do appreciate your time to give us feedback on today's session. Thank you, and have a good day.